Well, at first I would like to acknowledge the presence of Dr. Kota and Mrs. Kota, and it's so very nice to have met you again, sir, after such a long time. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I do consider it a privilege to be amongst you all today, and I am greatly honored to be invited to deliver this second Guru Kalam Memorial Lecture. You know, when Mahatma Gandhi was asked by a British reporter if there was a message for him that he could take back to his people, Gandhiji, who was going through a Maun Vrat at that time, scribbled just 5 words on a scrap of paper. And he wrote, "My life is my message." Now this holds true for former President Kalam as well. And I have decided to pay tribute to his memory by speaking about all that he had stood for, because I believe that he attained the heights that he did primarily due to his belief system. In fact, he had practiced in his professional life all that he has been preaching during his lectures. So from selling newspapers at a railway station to becoming a leading newsmaker of New India, so that was President Kalam. So how should we refer to him as? Do we refer to him as just an aerospace engineer because he graduated as one from the Madras Institute of Technology? Or should we be calling him Rocket Man for helming the SLV-3 launch? Maybe we should be calling him Atomic Man for being the director of Pokhran-2. Or perhaps Satellite Man for guiding the Rohini satellite launch. I think the even better description would be to call him the Missile Man of India, for his stellar role in the Agni and the Prithvi programs. And we shouldn't forget that we can also call him an inventor for developing the Kalam Raju stent, which was invented in India for Indians, and this he did along with Dr. Somaraju. So Dr. Kalam was a man of many parts, and each part more important than the other. But when we put these parts together, a clear picture begins to emerge, and that picture is that all his efforts were directed towards nation building. Before I talk any further about Dr. Kalam's exploits and how he got to be who he was, I would like to share my thoughts about what is happening to the rest of us in this country. Some of us have been a part of our country's recent past, some like us of its present, and the young audience that is sitting here will be contributing to our country's future and the country's future growth in time to come. Talking about myself, I came into being just 16 months after India gained independence. I am told that once the dust of partition settled, our countrymen rolled up their sleeves and went to work and got down to building the India of Gandhiji's dreams. And in that, they were assisted very ably by political leaders and thousands of motivated commoners who had sacrificed much to free our country from the British. If we now fast forward to today, that is 2017, we see we've had 7 decades of tumultuous growth, and mostly the tumult was arising from technological advancement on the one hand, and on the other, the dilution of societal norms and value systems that had been intrinsic to our Indianness. Now, how did this happen? Was our moral compass flawed to begin with, or did it simply fall into disuse? After all, ours is the oldest culture existing on the planet. Or were we reading too much into the societal values that we were told we had? Or is it simply that the parameters that define our present existence have not kept pace with the rate at which other cultures have been evolving in the rest of the world, especially in the developed world, with the passage of time and with the advent of technology? Whichever way one looks at it, it surprises me that we have reached where we presently are, despite there having been a steady erosion in our professional and personal value systems during this 70-year time period. So the report card of the nation's character growth shows a disturbing downward trend. Now, again, going back to my childhood, I remember with nostalgia the hours that I had spent reading about one author, Munshi Premchand's short story called Namak Ka Daroga. I wonder whether anybody has read it. I was a young boy at school at that time. And very briefly, it was the story of a young man who was appointed to the post of a salt inspector in the early 1900s by the British. In those days, salt was a taxable commodity. Today, most everything is a taxable commodity. So this boy's father was overjoyed because his son got this job. And the reason was that he had always wanted his son to look for a lucrative job having the potential for illegal gratification or under-the-table money, as graft used to be referred to in those days. It's called different things now. And his son was named Vanshidhar, on the other hand, was differently inclined. And he discharged his function with honesty and diligence. He ensured that everybody paid the tax that was due on salt, and he ensured that illegal export of this commodity did not take place out of the city limits. But the city's most influential and rich businessman, and you'll find out how he got rich, had organized a long convoy of bullock carts laden with salt for transportation out of the city limits. And this he did under the cover of darkness. Vanshidhar, the salt inspector, found out about this and apprehended the businessman, the influential Pandit Alopidin. He had him arrested. And Alopidin offered him a bribe of 40,000 rupees, which he refused. So after Alopidin was arrested, the case went to court. But the judiciary had already been bought out by Alopidin, and Alopidin was acquitted. Vanshidhar received a censure, and a few weeks later, he was suspended. He returned home disgraced. The story didn't end there. Within weeks, Alopidin visited the ancestral house of Vanshidhar, and he was met by Vanshidhar's father at the door who was apologizing profusely to Pandit Alopiddin for his son's misdemeanors. But Alopiddin brushed that aside and requested Vanshidhar and requested him to accept his offer of being Alopiddin's estate manager, because he knew Vanshidhar was an honest man and he would take good care of his assets. Now, in the story, the concepts of honesty and duty came through clearly, and it left a lasting impression on me. I also remember that we were taught the subject of moral science in school in those days. This subject today is perhaps considered passé by the educationists, and in fact it no longer finds a place in the school curriculum and the syllabi. So the question is, how did our society go from producing Vanshidhars to those that presently run our country through our dysfunctional national institutions? How did that happen? And I think that Munshi Premchand's, the author, his writings are as relevant today as it was in the early 1900s when he penned Namak Ka Daroga. Nothing has changed. The cause-effect relationship equation has not changed. It is relevant even today. The only thing that has changed is that it has taken on a more sophisticated veneer. So much so that a majority of our country folk today consider nothing wrong in either being corrupt themselves or in aiding and abetting corruption. So this majority has ensured that corrupt practices will survive in perpetuity. The sophistication arises from clever, self-serving rationalizations like, if I do not bribe, my work will never get done. Actually, the subtext being, look, I do not have time to waste. My business gets hurt by bureaucratic delays that are built into a corrupted system. If I do not pay speed money, they call it speed money now, if I do not pay speed money, my competitor will, and I will lose the first mover advantage. So business people quieten their consciences in this manner, and they are able to look themselves in the mirror as they go about feeding the monster of corruption, thus ensuring its longevity. So, do nations become great because it is so ordained or by happenstance, or do they become great by responsible actions of its responsible citizens? Quite obviously, the key here is being responsible. And how do we get responsible? Seems to me that the first step is to recognize what constitutes irresponsibility. The medical man who prescribes unnecessary, expensive investigations to inflate the medical bill is being irresponsible. The judge who keeps giving extensions on flimsy excuses time after time to either the prosecuting or the defense counsel is being irresponsible. If the chief executive of either a corporate entity or the government of the day prefers to look the other way while he knows that the till is being raided, he is being irresponsible. No matter what his or her compulsion was or has been, that is academic. And the tourists who litter around places of great natural beauty with the expectation that the government will clean up after them, they're all being irresponsible, selfishly irresponsible. So the stone pelters, the frenzied bus-burning mobs, the vigilante lynch gangs, along with organizers and funders of such groups, they are all irresponsible and anti-national. None of them qualify to be either influencers of change or change agents. Right. So during these 7 decades, our nation has moved from jihazuri to non-cooperation. Non-cooperation this time not with the British, but with the government of the day. So today it seems to have settled quite comfortably into a chalta hai attitude. And you know that 70 years is a long time in the lifespan of a human being, but it is not so in a nation's history. So if we take this chronological age analogy further, I think our nation is already at the threshold of adulthood. And that is when we all need to get responsible. So before we move to fix this sorry state of affairs, it would help if we ponder on the factors that got us to this point in the first place. There was a time when we used to cringe at functionaries who indulged in unfair practices. After a period of time, wealthy persons began wielding influence. And once they became influential, they began wielding power, if they wanted to. And our lives today are run by wealthy and influential persons who are in the garb of politicians and bureaucrats. Not all bureaucrats, but certainly all politicians. Never mind how they got to be where they presently are, because today it is the end that matters and not the means. The competition is extreme, and so the end has begun to justify the means that are adopted to reach that end. Now, in this situation, it would be foolhardy to expect our dysfunctional national institutes to fix the mess that they find themselves in. You know, it's like a sick physician trying to heal himself. It will have to be done by someone who is willing to pay the price to set right the wrong that has been done over the years. And to first attain and then maintain a just, equitable and vibrant society, we need to depend only on the segment of the population that would be ready to invest in securing its own future. These are the stakeholders. That is, you and me, we ourselves. Only we can set this right. So, some of you are going to be in authoritative positions when you start in your careers. We just need to ensure at that time that we do not present our subordinates with a Hobson's choice, cruel choice, and the cruel choice being A, discharge your function by deciding issues on merit, but be warned that it may jeopardize your career. And B, the choice should not be offered. Do only what the organization wants you to do, and be assured that your career graph will keep rising. In other words, Jo Hukum, Ji Huzur. So those of us who are not in positions of authority, we need to revisit our understanding of the terms honor and duty. If we wish to contribute to the India of the future, then we have to do this the right way. we really need to think along the same lines that Munshi Premchand did when he penned Namak Ka Daroga. So those of us who are forced to deal with our dysfunctional government organization would do well to remember that a corrupt transaction can go through only if both parties are willing, the buyer and the seller of an undeserving favor. If one or the other is unwilling, corruption takes a hit. We have often heard the lament that, we have nobody to look up to. We do not have proper role models. Now, there is much wringing of hands by those who complain about these things. The fact of the matter is that our country has always had role models. It is just that we have elected not to emulate them. Role models always have been treading the more difficult path, the less popular one. They've always been on roads which are less traveled. So to have a courage of one's conviction in the face of opposition that wants to maintain the status quo, catering only to oneself rather than national interest, was never easy. It's not easy today. It's not going to be easy for all of you stakeholders who want to change the status quo to ensure better futures for yourself. It's not going to be easy. So be warned about that. It's just, we find that most of us look for easier solutions, and we look for easier solutions because it's the easier thing to do. We do not prefer to do the right, more difficult thing. So we are here to honor the memory of President Kalam, and in him we have a superb role model. His deeds will always live after him. His diligence and dedication had carried him through a remarkable and challenging career, and it took him all the way to the top. Indeed, he occupied the highest office of our land for 5 long years. And while he was in office, he endeared himself to the masses and raised the bar of the then existing standard of probity while he remained in that public office. Expenses which were incurred by Rashtrapati Bhavan on his personal guests were personally paid for by him. I bring this point up because I feel that character has a direct bearing on one's professional performance. If I put it in an equation form, both are directly proportional. So let me digress a little bit here, because some of you are shortly going to be at the threshold of your careers, while maybe some of your seniors have just about started in theirs. So let's try and spend a minute or two to define tomorrow's professional. What kind of a professional will our country need tomorrow? Well, I believe that the professionals of tomorrow must first resolve the age-old conflict in their minds as to what is it that constitutes success. I think success itself needs to be redefined. What constitutes success? Is it financial wealth, a high salary, a fancy designation, a corner office, or just fulfillment, professional fulfillment? Does success mean being professionally fulfilled? Now, this, according to me, is an important question, because the answer influences our choices, and it influences it profoundly. And I think the time to mull over this choice, the time is now at the start of one's career, because the answer to that will decide the trajectory of one's approach and attitude towards work during your career. I truly believe that if people are passionate about their chosen line of work, if they are diligent, if they remain dedicated to their job, work with integrity, be bothered about their professional reputations, if they have the risk-taking ability, if they have the courage of their own convictions, and when they become leaders, if they lead with empathy and be team players and motivators, then success will be theirs for the asking. So one can be fulfilled just by being an upright and well-respected professional. Now, tomorrow's India needs that kind of a professional. But how do we get to be that kind of a professional? How do we future-proof? How would we make ourselves future-ready in this aspect? What should be the ingredients? Well, I believe that to excel, like I said, a person must have passion in his job, irrespective of what line you choose for yourself. And the next is a no-brainer. He must have innovative ability. But more often than not, what happens is that one who is passionate about his job will develop innovative ability, because he will never take defeat for an answer. He will keep at it till he cracks the problem. Next is attitude. Now, attitude is an important attribute for tomorrow's professional. And I think it is best exemplified by that living legend of basketball, Michael Jordan. How many of you follow basketball here? Well, quite a few hands. So you must have heard of Michael Jordan, right? And you know what Michael Jordan said? How he defined his ability, his attitude. He said, I've missed more than 6,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and I missed. I failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. It just goes to show that he had the aptitude to play the game. He had the passion for the game. That's why he didn't quit. And he had the attitude of a professional who took failure in his stride. Now, by far, the two most important traits I have left for the end. And one is integrity, and the other is character. Now, integrity is a word like nationalism or secularism, because it means different things to different people. And there is enough and more evidence that most successful companies are founded on a strong integral footing where honesty, transparency, and ethical practice is the norm. It's not the exception. So having said that integrity means different things to different people, I don't think we should leave this matter open-ended and open to speculation and interpretation. You'll come up with different answers. Well, my good friend Subrata Bagchi, the co-founder of Mindtree here in Bangalore, and he's also the author of the international bestseller called The Professional. He has given a very simple and succinct definition of integrity. He has said that the touchstone to judge whether integrity is being compromised or not lies in just 4 statements. And these statements are: we follow rules. Where rules do not exist, we use fair judgment. When in doubt, we do not go ahead and do what suits us, we seek counsel. Finally, faced with a difficult choice, we ask ourselves, can my act stand public scrutiny without causing embarrassment to me and my family? Of course, oftentimes in our careers, we will be confronted with complex issues, and decision making will not reside in the domain of black or white. So the last definition of integrity, that will help us gain an insight as to how we should be dealing with that dilemma of handling the various shades of gray that lie between black and white when one is struggling to practice integrity. Now that was about integrity. So it would also be worthwhile to get to know basically what is character. The best definition that I could find of character, it came bundled with the definition of personality. Now, personality is who we are and what we do when everybody is watching. Character is who we are and what we do when nobody is watching. So, this part I'm going to address only to the youth, the students, and I want to tell you that my generation dropped the baton because it tolerated the loss of our moral compass. In fact, it aided and abetted the loss of that moral compass. The next generation, and in fact even your children, will need to pick up that baton and start running again. And as for you guys, the current aspirational generation, you need to reacquaint yourselves with the true meaning of the terms honor, duty, integrity, and character. And then you need to further explain these. You've got to live that and explain these concepts to your children when you have families of your own. As I had brought out earlier, the President of India, in the person of APJ Abdul Kalam, insisted on paying the cost of entertaining his personal guests instead of letting the state take care of those expenses. By that one act alone, he displayed both remarkable integrity and strength of character, you will agree. Towering personality indeed. So the current generation needs to discuss these aspects with their children, and also as to what constitutes success. And we talked about that earlier. How do you define success? Quite like late President Kalam taught himself, what is the meaning of success? The nation must come first before one's self-interest. And it must do so always and every time. Well, I want you to know that young India is a blessed generation. I say this not only because in your lifetimes you shall witness, but if you so desire, you will also be contributing towards some momentous changes that are bound to take place in our great country. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening and being a part of this tribute to our late President, APJ Abdul Kalam. Jai Hind.